The note was waiting on the floor when Suzanne Chandler opened her bedroom door that Tuesday morning. No knock. No conversation. Just a single sheet of paper pushed underneath the door she'd slept behind since she was 12. Starting next month, rent will increase to $1,900. Family needs to support family. Love, Mom. Suzanne read the note twice, then a third time, hoping the number would somehow change. It didn't. 6 weeks later, she would sit in front of her computer, staring at her credit report, and realize that someone inside her own family hadn't just raised her rent. They had stolen her future. My name is Suzanne Chandler. I'm 34 years old, and for 9 years, I paid my parents to live in my childhood bedroom in Dayton, Ohio. I thought I was helping my family survive a difficult season. I had no idea that I was financing someone else's life while quietly sacrificing my own. And the worst part? The betrayal wasn't coming from where I expected. 9 years earlier, Suzanne had left Chicago and moved back home after her father suffered a heart attack. We need you here, her mother had whispered over the phone from a hospital hallway. So Suzanne came home. At first, it made sense. $600 a month for her old room was cheaper than an apartment, and her father needed support. She told herself it would only be temporary. Temporary turned into birthdays. Birthdays turned into years. And somehow, at 34, Suzanne was still sleeping beneath the same water stain on the ceiling she'd stared at as a little girl. Every month, she left an envelope beside the sugar jar in the kitchen. Every month, her mother carefully wrote the payment into a blue notebook that never left the counter. Groceries. Electric bills. Church donations. Suzanne's rent. Everything was tracked. Everything except one person. Her older brother, Brandon. Brandon was 37 and ran a marketing company that always seemed to be one big opportunity, tie away from success. Every Sunday night, he arrived with exciting news about a new client, a new office, or a new idea that was supposedly going to change everything. And somehow, the family always found money for him. One evening, Brandon pulled into the driveway in a brand new SUV. Their mother rushed outside, smiling. Their father walked around the car, admiring it. Brandon laughed as he explained how important appearances were for business. Meanwhile, Suzanne stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, and mentally calculating whether she could still afford to buy a condo before turning 35. No one asked about her plans. No one asked about her dreams. Instead, her mother handed her the electric bill. Suzanne noticed the pattern years ago. She just didn't want to admit what it meant. Because every time Brandon's business struggled, something strange happened inside the Chandler house. Her rent increased. Another bill landed on her shoulders. Another sacrifice became her responsibility. But there was something even stranger hidden beneath all of it. Something Suzanne wouldn't discover until much later. Because the blue notebook on the kitchen counter wasn't the real record of who owed what in that family. The real ledger was hidden somewhere else. And when Suzanne finally found it, she would discover that her name had been written on a $38,000 loan she had never signed. That Tuesday morning, sitting alone on the edge of her childhood bed with the note still trembling in her hand, Suzanne asked herself a question she had avoided for nearly a decade. If utilities hadn't gone up, if groceries weren't actually that expensive, then where was the extra money really going? 3 days later, Brandon accidentally gave her the answer. And that answer would destroy everything Suzanne thought she knew about her family. Sunday dinner had always followed the same script. Brandon arrived 20 minutes late, carrying big promises and bigger dreams. Their mother hurried to warm his plate while their father asked the same question he asked every week. How's business? Better than ever, Brandon said with a grin. Actually, I've got some huge news. Suzanne barely looked up from the dishes she was carrying to the table. Then Brandon pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward everyone. A photo of an empty storefront downtown. BC Peak Marketing is expanding. New office. New chapter. Their mother clapped her hands together. Their father smiled proudly. Suzanne felt something tighten in her chest. 3 days earlier, her rent had suddenly jumped from $1,400 to $1,900. Now, somehow, Brandon had enough money to open a brand new office. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. After dinner, when the plates had been cleared and her father disappeared into the living room, Suzanne placed the note on the kitchen counter beside her mother's blue notebook. "Is my extra $500 paying for Brandon's office?" The room went silent. Her mother slowly folded the dish towel in her hands. "Your brother is going through a difficult season," she said calmly. "Families help each other." Suzanne stared at her. "So that's a yes. You have a stable career, sweetheart. Brandon is building something. Things balance out." Suzanne looked toward the living room, hoping her father would say something. He didn't. Without turning around, he quietly muttered, "Don't turn this into a fight, Susie. Don't turn this into a fight." Those words had solved every problem in their family for years. Suzanne took a deep breath and surprised everyone with her response. "Fine," she said. "I'll pay the new rent." Her mother's face relaxed instantly. "But from now on, every payment goes through the bank. No more cash. I want a record of every dollar." For the first time that night, her mother's smile disappeared. And Suzanne had no idea why such a simple request made her mother look terrified. The smile disappeared from her mother's face so quickly that Suzanne almost missed it. For years, cash envelopes had moved quietly between family members, disappearing into the blue notebook on the kitchen counter. Suddenly, the idea of a paper trail seemed to make everyone uncomfortable. Her mother forced a laugh. "Since when do families need bank records?" Suzanne shrugged and reached for her glass of water. "Since rent became $1,900 a month." Across the room, her father stared at the television without really watching it. Brandon checked his phone, pretending he wasn't listening. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then her mother picked up the notebook and said, "Do whatever makes you happy." The conversation ended there, but Suzanne couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The next morning, she opened a new spreadsheet on her laptop. She named it Personal Expenses. One column for rent. One for utilities. One for groceries. And one for the money that somehow kept flowing toward Brandon. For the first time in 9 years, Suzanne wasn't trusting feelings. She was trusting numbers. And the numbers told a story she didn't want to believe. Over the next 2 weeks, every payment went through bank transfers. Rent, $1,900. Electric bill, $217. Internet, $89. Even when her mother asked her to cover Brandon's car insurance just for this month, Suzanne sent the money electronically and added a memo. Brandon Insurance. When her mother saw those words on the transfer confirmation, something strange crossed her face. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Fear. Suzanne noticed it immediately. She didn't understand it yet, but she wrote the moment down in her spreadsheet anyway. Because that's what analysts do. A few days later, Suzanne finally allowed herself to think about something she hadn't dared imagine in years, her own future. She still had enough money saved for a condo. Not a mansion. Not some luxury penthouse. Just a small place with sunlight, a balcony, and a front door that belonged only to her. For months, she had been preparing for this moment. Her savings account was healthy. Her income was stable. Her credit score was excellent. Everything was ready. Or so she thought. One Friday afternoon, Suzanne gathered her tax returns, pay stubs, and bank statements and scheduled an appointment with a mortgage lender for the following week. Driving home from work that evening, she felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time since moving back to Dayton, there was an actual finish line in sight. But while Suzanne was planning her escape, someone else was making plans of their own. That Sunday, Brandon arrived at dinner carrying a black folder with the BC Peak marketing logo printed across the front. He placed it on the table like a businessman preparing for a meeting. "I've got something exciting to show everyone," he announced. Their mother practically glowed with pride. Brandon opened the folder and started talking about expansion plans, new clients, and the perfect office space downtown. Then he reached the final page and leaned back in his chair. "I just need one more investment to get things moving." As he said the word investment, his eyes locked onto Suzanne. Not their father. Not their mother. Her. Suzanne suddenly understood something that made her stomach turn. The rent increase wasn't the real plan. It was only the beginning. For 9 years, she had believed she was helping her family survive difficult times. Now, sitting at that kitchen table, she realized she had become the emergency fund everyone expected to refill. She slowly put down her fork. And for the first time in her life, she said a single word that changed everything. "No." The word hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, nobody moved. Brandon blinked, as if he genuinely hadn't heard her correctly. Their mother slowly lowered her glass onto the table. "What do you mean, no?" Brandon asked, forcing a laugh. Suzanne looked directly at him. "I mean, I've already invested enough." The smile disappeared from Brandon's face. Their mother leaned forward. "Suzanne, your brother is trying to build something important." "And I've spent 9 years paying for it," Suzanne replied quietly. Across the table, her father stared down at his plate, saying nothing. The silence hurt more than any argument could have. That night, Suzanne went upstairs, opened her laptop, and completed her mortgage application. She uploaded her bank statements, tax returns, and employment records, then clicked submit. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. A small condo. Morning sunlight through the windows. A balcony with basil plants. A front door that belonged only to her. 10 days later, her phone rang at work. The mortgage officer's voice sounded different this time. "I'm sorry, Suzanne, but there's a problem with your application." Suzanne frowned. "What kind of problem?" There was a brief pause. "We found a loan under your name." Suzanne laughed nervously. "That's impossible." The woman took a deep breath. "According to the records, 2 years ago you co-signed a $38,000 loan for Brandon Chandler." Everything around Suzanne seemed to stop. "I never signed anything," she whispered. The mortgage officer hesitated before speaking again. "Then you need to pull your credit report immediately." Suzanne slowly lowered the phone from her ear. Because deep down, she already knew something terrible had happened. Suzanne sat frozen at her desk, the mortgage officer's words echoing in her head. $38,000. Her name. Her credit. Her future. And she had never signed a single document. That night, she drove home in complete silence. For 9 years, that house had been the place she called home. But as she parked in the driveway and looked at the light glowing from the kitchen window, something felt different. For the first time, she didn't feel like a daughter coming home. She felt like a stranger. After everyone had gone to bed, Suzanne opened her laptop and pulled up her full credit report. There it was. Primary borrower, Brandon Chandler. Co-signer, Suzanne Chandler. Her hands started shaking. She checked the date on the loan documents and suddenly remembered something that made her stomach drop. 2 years earlier, the entire family had gone to the bank together to help her father with retirement paperwork. Her mother had handled every document that day. Every signature. Every form. Suzanne couldn't sleep. The next morning, she went straight to the credit union and requested the loan file. Hours later, sitting in a small office, she stared at the signature page. Someone had written her name. But it wasn't her handwriting. It was her mother's. In that moment, 9 years of memories suddenly looked different. The rent increases. The endless sacrifices. The emergencies. The guilt. Everything. That evening, Suzanne returned home and quietly placed the document on the kitchen table. Her mother looked at it for a few seconds and then calmly said something Suzanne would never forget. Your brother needed help. We're family. Everything in this house belongs to everyone. Suzanne stood there in complete disbelief. My name doesn't belong to everyone, she whispered. For the first time in her life, she realized that love and obligation were not the same thing. 2 weeks later, Suzanne packed her entire life into a few boxes and moved into a small apartment across town. She filed the fraud report. She froze her credit. And she finally chose herself. Months later, the loan disappeared from her credit report, and shortly before her 35th birthday, Suzanne bought her own condo. A small place. An east-facing balcony. A pot of basil by the window. And one front door that belonged only to her. Today, she still thinks about the family she lost. But she also thinks about something her grandmother told her. Love is not a debt you pay to earn your place in someone's life. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the person what always gives more than they receive, remember this. Protect your future. Protect your name. And never let anyone convince you that sacrifice is the price of love. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the person who always gives more than they receive, remember this.